Hello, my name is Sean Lee, and this is my major project for Intro to Anthropology. In this presentation, I'm going to present some of the things that I learned from the 8 articles that I read, as well as go over my hypothetical research project that involves battlefield archaeology. One of the biggest things I learned from this project was just how big anthropology is. And I would say across the class, I did not realize how encompassing anthropology was. I did not know going into it that it had all these subfields, and I did not realize the 4 main subfields, what they were, and how they approach human life in all drastically different ways, and they all come together and help us understand who we are as a species. I've always loved the study of people ever since I was a little kid, and taking this class has really helped me kind of organize my thoughts when I study people and places and things, but more specifically the people and how they interact with everything in an environment, including themselves. Um, for cultural anthropology, I realized, I learned that culture really shapes identity, meaning in everyday life. The article about the Houston Pride Parade shows us how important rituals are and how much of a powerful tool they are for solidarity in especially marginalized communities. The other article I read for the culture anthropology section was about the edible bird's nest and how bird's nests in Asia symbolize health and status, and it kind of put to the forefront the idea how important food is, can carry such a cultural meaning. I mostly work in the gay community, training people, and I definitely realize how important, um, you know, gatherings of like people are, and the symbolisms that they use, and just how much it impacts their lives. For archaeology, which is definitely my favorite subfield of anthropology, um, just kind of reinforce how much physical remains can help us understand the past and how fragile physical remains can be. Recently I've gotten pretty obsessed with prehistory humanity and how much we don't know because it simply doesn't exist anymore. And I just, you wonder what things were really like 8, 5, 10,000 years ago, because there's simply no more trace of it. I love the discovery and the study of places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and how it's kind of reshaped how we think about humanity, and how advanced we may or may not have been 5, 7, 10,000 years ago. And I'm not sure we'll ever really know what we were capable of and the technology we had as a species, because so much of it does not exist anymore. But I'm really excited by the idea that new discoveries will be made in my lifetime of physical remains that will reshape how we think about humanity and what we were capable of, 5 to 10,000 years ago, and even further. I really enjoyed the articles about Tanzania and how, working with the local community, they're kind of able to recapture their history that was wiped out by colonialism, and how much involved the locals are in that process. I think that's extremely important, and it kind of goes to my major project, my hypothetical project. Big scene of it is at the Chickamauga battlefield in northwest Georgia, which I have visited a few times, and it's extremely overwhelming spiritual place for me, knowing that I had ancestors there, and just imagining, just seeing the battlefield and knowing that there were tens of thousands of men there dying and fighting is it's just a really overwhelming place for me personally, and that's why I chose it for my project. In biological anthropology, this is probably the one that I am least familiar with. Um, I learned about how human origins, evolution, and biology, um, how behavior is studied. Um, Scientists investigating the use of violence, really, as a deep evolutionary uh, trait, and something that's been critical to our survival, is very interesting. And um, you know, biological anthropology is almost, I relate it into what I'm into. It's almost the anthropology of behavior as much as anything. You know, and also how, and going back to the Tanzania article and the archaeological projects they have there, um, kind of how much the local people of a anthropological site, how important they are in the um, excavation, research, preservation, and passing on of the knowledge that is learned at a place, is is a big deal. Linguistic anthropology um, is a field of anthropology I'd never really thought about before taking this class. Um, I guess I did, just not in these terms. Obviously, you've got language is ever evolving. I mean, I live next door to two professors of language at Emory, and so we talk all the time, about their special interest, and you know, by reading the articles, um, the first one about the woman who was from Syria, and kind of realizing that her mom's accent, all that went into that, and how um, her accent symbolized a much deeper story to her. Um, it shapes our identity and our belonging. Language does. Um, I was very interested in the Chickasaw um, language article, considering that um, where we are in Georgia. Um, at one time there were Chickasaw indigenous peoples not too far from here. It's very interesting, and I remember learning about them as far back as middle school, and their language, and it's really cool how they using modern technology like a mobile app to save their language, which kind of reminded me of the use of the Navajo language during World War II with the code talkers. So I really, that article is right up my alley. Um, it kind of highlighted how, is all the downsides that come with technology, how we could use technology to further save and um, study culture. I really enjoyed all of these articles. There was a huge amount to choose from. So it was very refreshing to be able to kind of go through and find ones that interested me the most. Um, for my proposed study, I chose to do a study on Civil War and Revolutionary War battlefields, mainly because this is just such a topic that is very dear to my heart, and I already have, just a little bit of experience being able to study these places. My very first semester in college back in 2013, I took to this day what was my favorite college class. It was called Battlefield Archaeology. Um, my professor was like a real life Indiana Jones, and we got to catalog and learn about artifacts that he personally dug up, mostly from Europe in World War II time frame, and getting to really get your hands on this stuff and learn from a guy who was actually out there in the field was very exciting for me, and it made me, like I said, to this day, it's still my favorite class. Um, so my proposed study really focuses on battlefield archaeology at Civil War and Revolutionary sites, particularly Chickamauga in Georgia, Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, and the Yorktown battlefield in Virginia from the Revolutionary War, where we were able to kind of solidify our country's existence with the help of the French, of course. Um, I chose these places not just because, they're just some random battlefields, but they are really cultural landscapes where thousands and they were huge battles. I mean, Chickamauga was the second bloodiest battle, one day battle of the Civil War behind Antietam. I mean, Gettysburg was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. It was a 3 day battle. And Yorktown was a massive siege, really. That is, all three sites are very well preserved, and though I'm sure over the years have been excavated thoroughly, I would, it would be so cool to use all of the modern tools available to do my own study. Um, I really love the perspective of the human experience in these events is what interests me the most, which is anthropology. You know, getting to examine evidence like musket balls and pieces of rifles and uniforms and camp debris and medical sites, and they really give an understanding of what these soldiers really went through. And you know 99.9% of humans today, especially in the United States, cannot imagine the hell and carnage that occurred at these places. And I think if you can get it, you know, one person to gain an appreciation and, you know, history in general, if taught uh, like you're describing a soap opera, which history really is that, it is the most interesting subject I think that there is. There is nothing more crazy to know that these things really happened, and they're just astonishing. And if they can be explained and related to people, they truly appreciate them, and what occurred. Um, my primary location of work would be the Chickamauga battlefield, just because I have been there so many times, and uh, the pictures from my PowerPoint I took personally there back in 2020, which was a great time to go visit battlefields during the pandemic. Um, I really, like I said earlier, I really have a connection to that place. And I picked these three sites as well because they represent, you know, two vastly different fields of the Civil War. You know, Chickamauga was in the Western theater, Gettysburg was in the East, and then you have Yorktown to represent the Revolutionary War, which, we think of, 1781, 1863. Things were a lot of similarities, but there were a lot of differences too, especially in the type of technology used in weaponry, but also the amount of people involved. I mean, the average Civil War battle was so astonishing large compared to the average Revolutionary battle, which, might have had a few thousand people in it maximum. And the weapons used during the Revolution were, you know, a few hundred yards is the max range. Maybe if you're lucky, we're talking about volley firing. Maybe you hit someone, maybe you don't. But in the Civil War, we've got rifled muskets, we've got cannons that can shoot thousands of yards, we've got muskets that can shoot in the hundreds of yards, to devastating effect. And, it'd be interesting to examine the impact of the technology and the size of the battles of each place. To do the research, I think we've got a lot of fantastic methods these days, things like metal detectors, which of course have been around for a long time. But you've got geographic information systems to virtually reconstruct troop movements. You got ground penetrating radar to locate, unknown trenches or field hospitals or, all sorts of things that may have been buried and lost to time that we don't know about. It's also, I love to examine, firsthand correspondences. People are writing letters to each other about the battle after the war, during the war. The correspondence between the generals, real time. Hey, this is what's happening. They're passing orders. I am a very holistic person. I am a trainer. And the way I train people is very holistic. It's not just about going to the gym. It's about all the pillars of success. I call it the 5 pillars of physical success. And I think to, properly study a subject in anthropology, you have to take a holistic approach as well. And that's what I would want to do in this project. I think it's so important to study these places because, they really had a lot of impact on us today, whether we realize it or not. And I don't know if it's just curse of the moment or what, but I feel like a lot of this knowledge is being lost. When I was in high school, I felt very moved to do a project where I would interview World War II veterans because I had known some World War II veterans and really valued my time getting to know them and talk to them. And I was discouraged from pursuing that project. People said, oh, they don't want to talk, blah, 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 And, I did not go with my gut and I listened to other people and now they are all dead. And that knowledge is gone. And I'm not going to be able to, pass their human experiences along to other people. So I definitely have learned from my mistake, and I want to take advantage of what I can while I can to hopefully be able to package it in a way to teach people and make them as interested in it as I am and as I know that it can be when it's taught with not this boring, just, oh, you're reading a textbook type of deal, because like I said, history is crazier than anything we can come up with. The things that have happened are unbelievable. And often fiction is based on reality anyway. So, using some of these articles, gave me a lot of inspiration for this research project, especially a few articles that I did not even include in the PowerPoint. Like there was an article about battlefield plunder. I've got my article about that I used about how a lot of the archaeologists, archaeological, archaeo, archae, sorry, the sites in the West Bank that have been massively affected by the conflicts there, and how they're just being wiped off the map is, and how it's very upsetting, and how there's such an effort to preserve those places. Um, so I've really went over my time by a lot, and I'm really sorry. But in conclusion, this project really was a great capstone to this class, and it really kind of tied everything together in a tangible way. Um, I learned really good from hands-on real life experiences, and these articles kind of, all the things that we've read in all the chapters, it kind of put it into it was putting theory into practice, and so I really enjoyed it. And learning how all the different subfields kind of create layers of studying a different subject. So I thank you for watching, and I'm really sorry I went over this by 15 minutes, and I'm sorry that this project has been so late. I've been really sick for the last couple weeks with a staph infection, a MRSA actually, and I just want to apologize for making this so long and so late. And I know you're very busy, and I appreciate all the knowledge that I have gained from taking your class and having such a experienced and multifaceted professor to learn from. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have maybe gotten some pleasure from my proposed research project. And if you're ever interested, let's go to Chickamauga together, because I would love to take you around. Thank you.